Hello, welcome back. Welcome to the third video in the fully automated luxury gay space communism lecture series. It's the third video, but it's the second week. I did two videos for the first week, an intro and a obvious objections to that intro video. I've gotten some feedback from some of you that both videos were helpful. I am going to try and get a Discord server up and running so that we can have these conversations online. I'm still figuring this out. I haven't started publishing my podcast, Everyday Anarchism, yet, which is where most of my energy is going, so I'm a little behind on this. I think I also said in that last video that week 2 in this lecture series was Marx, and it's not. That's next week. So, if you are just watching this video, that's fine. I'm going to try and make each of these videos worthwhile on their own. They will be better in the context of the other videos. They will also be better with the reading, but I'm going to try and make each of these videos worthwhile even if you haven't done the reading. I'm going to do it as intro and background. So this is a video to be watched before you do the reading. It's okay if you've already done the reading. I'll try and get the Marx video up sooner for those of you who are doing this in real time with me. So I've decided to call this video Fully Automated Luxury Gay Space Communism. Why now? Now, an obvious answer to why now is the pandemic. Part of the reason why I am doing this now is because my job and my childcare and everything just felt wrong, and I left the teaching profession that I had been in for, well, there's the cat. We knew this was coming. Those of you who have seen my videos before, you knew the cat was coming. His name is Bucky. Sorry, or you're welcome. Bucky's pretty awesome. But when I say why now, I don't mean why post-pandemic does it really seem like we need to take resources away from the people who have been allocating them and start allocating them in a different way. What I really mean is, what is happening in the grand sweep of history that makes fully automated luxury gay space communism necessary? And we're going to go all the way back to the birth of capitalism in the late 18th, early 19th century. Because you see, I think we are in a moment of historic change. I think we are about to experience an enormous transition in the way we do work, in the way we allocate resources, in the way we think of ourselves as a society. I don't know what this change is going to be. Obviously, no one does. But I think a change is coming. And fully automated luxury gay space communism is an optimistic idea of what the future could look like. And both of the readings, the one in Mother Jones and the one in Jacobin, if you don't know, these are both left-wing journals. Both of these readings agree with me. They see this current moment as the beginning of the end of the previous historical period. There's a really amazing, brilliant, dense, fairly difficult historian, Eric Hobsbawm, who we're not reading in this class, who has divided up, I guess, what he would call the modern world into different eras, starting with the late 18th century with the French Revolution, to a lesser extent the American Revolution, although that one was less politically transformative, and the Industrial Revolution. And his argument is that these two revolutions changed everything, and then roughly every 30 to 80 years after that, he has 4 books where he basically does everything from 1789 to the fall of the Soviet Union. Here's what has happened within each of these historical moments. The argument of fully automated luxury gay space communism is it's not time for a 5th Hobsbawm book from 1991 or 1989 to 2021. It's time for a new series. The big switchover is changing. So what's the big switchover? Well, for Hobsbawm, the big switchover is a combination of the Industrial Revolution, meaning all of a sudden the world can make more stuff than it needs. That's the Industrial Revolution, which it distributes through this method that we can call capitalism. More on that later. I don't want to get bogged down in capitalism right now. We will be talking about that when we talk about Marx. Next week is when I want to focus on what capitalism is. And the other thing is the French Revolution, which is you get national identity. You get people wanting to belong together in political groupings. So you get this big thing called the state that existed before but was divorced from identity, and you get this thing called capitalism, and they come together and they dominate the world from 1789 until roughly now. And that is going to go away. And let me tell you why I think it's going to go away, and it relates to jobs. I like to ask my students, how old do you think jobs are? And we can really answer this question fairly objectively, given our definition of a job, which is a fairly subjective thing, but I'm pretty confident in my definition. So you can think about it for a second. How old do you think jobs are? I'll wait. You got your answer? Okay, well, the answer I am most used to hearing is since the beginning of time. Jobs have always existed. People have always worked. Yes and no. People have always labored. That's what the Adam and Eve story is about. Why do people have to do work if they want to eat? But labor and jobs are different. If you think about it, most people who have jobs don't do labor. Recording these videos, until recently, was my job. Is this labor? Well, we can call it mental labor. It can be very difficult. It can be very complicated. It can be exhausting. It can be expensive. There can be a cat interrupting them. But it's not labor. So labor is old, and for as long as there's been labor, there have also been people who didn't labor. People who took the fruits of other people's labor, of which I am one, right? I'm in this nice house, and I did not build it, and I eat food that I did not grow. I do very, very, very little labor. But until recently, I had a job. So if jobs and labor are not the same thing, what's a job? This will tell us how old it is. Jobs are, if you haven't figured it out, 200, 230 years old. They date to the Industrial Revolution, this period that Hobsbawm is writing about. A job is when you go to a place, not your house, you go to work. You work for someone else in most cases, unless you are an entrepreneur. Even if you're a CEO, right? You're working for the board, you're working for the shareholders. You do work for a set amount of time, and you get paid mostly by your time, not by your production, not by what you produce. A job is when you go somewhere and do work, not necessarily labor, for a certain amount of time for someone else, and they give you money. Farmer is not a job, right? You know, when people go to jobs, they say, hey, I'm going to work. Or, oh gosh, I'm so sick and tired of my boss. Farmers don't go to work. Farmers don't have bosses. If you are renting the land, or if you are a serf, or if you're an enslaved person in previous versions of farming, all of which actually do exist in various parts of the world, we just like to think that these things don't exist anymore because we don't see them much in the Western context, you still do not have a boss. You still do not have a job. You don't clock in and clock out if you're a sharecropper. And you don't clock in and clock out if you're the blacksmith of a village in the 15th century. You don't go to work. You wake up and you go downstairs and you fire up the bellows and you start smithing. Blacksmith is not a job. Farmer is not a job. People do not have jobs until the Industrial Revolution. You go to work. You do your job for someone else, they pay you. That's a job. Does that sound familiar? That's what a job is. These date back to the Industrial Revolution. They date back to factories. So if you are a professional, like if you're a teacher, guess what? Your job is modeled on a factory, right? You go to work for a set amount of time. You have a foreman, your principal, or whoever who tells you what to do. You have a product, which is your students. You clock in, you clock out. It's a job. It didn't used to be. Henry David Thoreau, who hated modernity, hated the Industrial Revolution, hated jobs, the man didn't have a job. He was a teacher. Anyone who wanted to could bring their kid to him, and he would teach that kid, and they would give him money. That's not a job. He was an entrepreneur. That doesn't exist anymore, really, for teaching, although it's starting to exist with things like tutoring and this. I'm kind of doing something like this, although at this current time I'm not taking in any money. Hopefully that will change. We've got a problem. Hopefully you figured out the problem by now. Cat, the problem is we don't need people's labor anymore. Now you could argue we haven't needed people's labor for decades. David Graeber makes this argument, and we will deal with that later. I don't want to deal with it right now, even though I'm desperate to talk about David Graeber. I'm always desperate to talk about David Graeber. When the podcast gets rolling, it'll be mostly about David Graeber. The robots are coming, and the robots can do everything we can do. Not right now. They're not ready to do everything we can do right now. But, gosh, they are going to get close. And some of the really good jobs are going to go away. I do not believe we need accountants right now. Accountants could go away right now if we chose to. If we put our software to work and if there was no accountancy lobby, we could get rid of accountants. In the Mother Jones piece, the author Kevin Drum divides jobs into these four categories with these two axes, routine versus non-routine. So is it something that is different every single time, or is it something that you can just do over and over again? Well, being an accountant, that is routine if you have the right data. I mean, I think the hard part for an accountant would be getting the data, but if we just standardize the data inputs for accountants, boom, we don't need accountants anymore. Ta-da! Oh, and the other thing is cognitive versus non-cognitive. Do you work in the physical world? Do you work in the real world? Or do you work in the world of the mind, the world of numbers? Machines have taken up a lot of the routine, non-cognitive work, the physical labor. The rule used to be that a person, one family could farm about 40 acres, with just the labor of that family and a mule. Hence the famous 40 acres and a mule formulation of the Freedmen's Bureau. Now, one person with the appropriate tractors can farm thousands of acres. And we probably don't need that one person. If we wanted to fully automate the fields, we could probably farm those big industrial agricultural fields without people. Elon Musk tried to fully automate his Tesla factory, and it didn't quite get there, but gosh, with a little more time, give him more time, he will fully automate that. Foxconn wants to fully automate its factories. So the factory jobs are going away. But the accountant jobs are going away also. A huge amount of growth lately has come in the service industry, but some of these things, like hairdresser, people really think the job of cutting and styling hair is going to stick around. But server, the person who takes you to your table, the person who takes your order at a restaurant, we can get rid of that right now. That is routine cognitive work. Jobs are going to go away unless we sustain them artificially. That's David Graeber. I'm going to continue trying to hold back on this. Graeber talks about what sort of world do we live in if we keep jobs for no real reason. Now, what do jobs do? Why do we have them? Well, jobs, remember, not labor. Not why do we have labor? Why do we have jobs? Well, we have jobs for a few reasons. For employers, jobs are a great way to get stuff done, to get profit, to get power. We'll talk all about that with Marx. But what do jobs do for people who have them, for employees? A few key things. One is jobs provide a sense of purpose. This has been steadily eroded for as long as there have been jobs. The sense of purpose has been pulled out of them. But no matter what your job is, it is still possible to find a sense of purpose in your job. This is why when you meet people, they have a tendency to ask you, hey, what do you do? Meaning, what are you? What kind of person are you? What value to have to society? Why do you exist? What is the point of you? And we say, oh, and then we say our job. So the job is who you are. Job is also how we allocate resources. Except for the ultra wealthy, the people who can live literally just off the money they or their parents already have, jobs are how you get money. So even if you're making $600,000 a year, those people will be screwed if they lose their job and can't get another one, because they probably own a $10 million home and they will lose that home, and we're not going to cry for them. They're just going to have to live in $1 million home if they lose their job. Nevertheless, the resources they have are tied into their job. For everyone who doesn't have multiple millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, these people have jobs. And then finally, for those of us who are not poor, for those who are not wealthy, super wealthy, jobs provide us with health insurance, specifically health insurance, but more generally a sense of security. There's supposed to be, for the quote good jobs, there's supposed to be retirement, dental, health insurance, life insurance. A job gives you not just a sense of purpose and the money you need to live your life, but the security you need to live your life. In other countries, in European countries, in particular the Nordic countries, you get this security not from your job as much. But in America, we give you your life security from your job. So that's what a job is. Except, remember, they're going away, except for a few things. Non-routine things. So, like, I would think teaching would be non-routine cognitive, or plumbing or hairdressing, non-routine, non-cognitive. Jobs are going to go away. The machines, the AI, are going to take our jobs. Here's the problem. Right now, jobs are how we give people a sense of purpose. It's how we give people the resources they need to live. It's how we give people the security they need to plan their life. This is what I was talking about when I said we were reaching a shift even bigger than the shifts that happen in 1991 or 1914 or 1848 or wherever Hobsbawm has set those previous shifts. Since 1789 or thereabouts, we have lived in a job-based world. We tore down the aristocracies, we tore down the monarchies, we tore down the old ways of producing food and shelter and resources. We tore down the old forms of work, we tore down the old hierarchies, and we replaced them with jobs. But we don't need jobs anymore. What are we going to do about it? My answer is fully automated luxury gay space communism. But in both of the readings, these two writers take a crack at the possibilities of a post-job world. And they both offer multiple options. What's the world going to look like if we don't have jobs anymore? And this will conclude the little introductory bit to this course. And after this, starting with the Marx, which we are going to get to next week, and I will try and, as soon as I can, put the reading for the Marx in the notes for this video, as well as a podcast about Marxism by Mike Duncan. If you want the background on Marxism, I'll do some of the background, but if you listen to this podcast, you will have all the background you need for Marxism to understand this reading. We're going to get into a very full and elaborate version of what a post-job world might look like. And you know what we're calling it. All right, see you next week.